Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to Hedgebrook's Cottage Chat with Dr. Sonora Jha and Honor Moore. My name is Amber Flame. I'm the program director here at Hedgebrook. I am so honored to be here to welcome you into our virtual cottage. This is a free event provided to our wonderful community out there, though we do take donations and we encourage you to support us during the Give Big campaign. I am so thrilled that this finally happened. We have been talking about this cottage chat, oh man, almost since the beginning, ever since I really started. Sonora and Honor have known each other for many years. They write about similar things in similar ways sometimes, and then they did something different, and they're going to be talking to us about that today. I'm really excited. They actually were the genesis of me thinking through how do we put alum in conversation with each other in a way that we can bring to community. And so the cottage chat idea actually started with Sonora and Honor. We've had a couple. We had our first one in February and one last March. Last March, like it was forever ago. It was actually in April, the beginning of April. Those are available on our YouTube channel, so check them out. But right now, we're going to get started with writing about feminism. I'm going to try to ask original questions. That's my big goal right now. But really, I'm going to try to get these women to enjoy each other, enjoy their company. I'm so honored to bring first to the stream Dr. Sonora Jha, most recently author of How to Raise a Feminist Son. It's catching all the buzz. I'm so honored that we're part of her book launch, and I encourage you to pick up that book as soon as you can. Sonora, thank you for joining me.
Hi, thank you for having me. It's so great to be here at Hedgebrook, where this book started and where it belongs and where I feel most at home.
Yes, I love it. I love that this picture that's behind us is so evocative of your cover, which is just this sort of flowering tree. How to Raise a Feminist Son is getting all the buzz. We're going to get to hear a little bit from the book itself before we launch into conversation. But right now, I am going to bring one of our strongest supporters over many, many years. She is always hype for Hedgebrook. She is always holding down her position as a creative advisory council member and making sure to mention Hedgebrook out in community. And she is the author of Our Revolution, A Mother and Daughter at Mid-Century, which is a very interesting way to write about feminism, to write about family, to write about grief, and so much more. I'm so thrilled to bring to the Hedgebrook stage Honor Moore.
Well, hi, I am so happy to be here, seeing the great Amber Flame for the first time. And Sonora and I met at Hedgebrook, and we met around the table at Hedgebrook, and we have been fast friends ever since, joined at the hip. We live on opposite coasts, but sometimes we have she cooks her own Indian dinner, and I have finally found a restaurant that's almost as good as her cooking. We decide to have the same dishes and eat them. She eats at 4 o'clock, nicely eats at 4:30, and I eat at 7:30. And we actually, this is our pandemic routine. And it was sort of out of that kind of pandemic-y, what a word.
It's a thing. It's a thing.
Existence that this event emerged. So I'm very thrilled to be here.
I actually also connected with Sonora first over a meal for our birthdays because we're both Aries in the house, and have had some of that delicious cooking along with my child. And so I'm envious of this connection because I'm like, this is a regular thing that happens. I have not yet found an Indian restaurant that cooks as good as Sonora. But I
said almost as good.
Almost as good, which is something, because you can't travel all the time, right?
As it turns out.
As it turns out. So thank you both so much for pursuing this, continuing to pursue this. I'm so glad it lined up for the release of this brilliant book, Sonora. Who would like to give us an excerpt first? Who wants to go first?
I'm going to go first because my book, which, what happened? Going into it here. My book, which I started at Hedgebrook, believe it or not, the very year I met Sonora, was published a year ago. It was published 2 days before lockdown.
Wow.
And it's just out in paperback. And I'm going to read you just a couple of snippets, including the part that was written in that lovely, I am like forgetting the name of the
Meadow House.
Meadow House.
Meadow House.
Mm-hmm.
Written in Meadow House. So, is that her I see now, walking across the meadow outside my window, the ground length white coat, white hair, chin raised, winter sun at her face. And then her face turns to me, dark blue eyes, the look that contains all I do not know. My mother died at 50 when I was in my 20s. So let me just, I seem to have lost my place here. So I'm sorry. Hang on.
No worries. Take your time. We're going to also drop a link to this so you know, those of you watching, so that you can pick this up. Give it to us. Lay it on us.
Okay. All I do not know. She had such glossy, thick hair, he said. Even though Evan's woolen is white-haired now, I see the shock of light brown hair across his broad forehead, and he is the man I knew as a child. Still has that sudden shy laugh. He was a young architect in his own firm in Indianapolis, where we moved when I was 11 and my mother was 34. Now at a cafe in the sculpture garden of the Museum of Modern Art, we are eating lunch, and he is 82. When I first knew him, he was 29. At a dinner party, he said when I asked how he and his wife had met my parents. He was introduced to my mother first, and immediately we were having a real conversation. I was now taking notes. Jenny was unusual in that way, distinct, he said. She would begin talking, and you felt that a good deal had been dispensed with and that you were talking to someone whom you had known for a long time. I liked her immediately, and the feelings deepened. A flicker of feeling at the edges of his mouth. She had such glossy, thick hair, he said again. I have had conversations resembling this one with several men, none of whom actually had love affairs with my mother. Writing now, I am looking out the window in a place where Jenny never was, a piece of the ocean, a mountain beyond that is only sometimes visible. It's nearly the end of the growing season, a few purple blossoms, some yellow leaves sprinkled on concrete, a rainy day that will brighten up by 4, a dense roof of clouds that will break, leaving incredibly some blue. I opened one of the banker's boxes and lay my mother's manuscripts on the floor. On a typed page of memoir dated July 6, 1973, I find this. Was I conceived in love? And if so, what does it mean? And if not, in what pain or need or out of what fright, in what loneliness or lust did my mother and father come together? It's composed on a typewriter on that crispy, erasable bond paper from the 1970s. I decide right then that when I quote her writing or exact speech, we'll always use italics. For I must begin there where I began, she wrote. How to find her as a baby, another photograph, and then a memory. Large, simply framed pastel in sweeps of green, blue, and sepia line. A baby is taking a nap. I don't remember ever not looking at that drawing. I looked at it before I had a word for drawing or for anything, before I knew a drawing could be of or by someone. Later, when I knew about by or of, I didn't ask who had done the drawing or who it was of, and so a silence formed around it, which I entered whenever I stood and looked up at it. I don't know if my not asking was pride, I was the oldest of 9, I was supposed to know everything, or a trait my situation as a child required. The house always too busy to ask such a quiet question, and so for many years I drew no conclusion as to the artist or the subject. I only vaguely knew that my mother's mother had once been an artist, Margaret as she was called more often than Grandma. We rarely visited her. She was mostly in mental hospitals for what was later diagnosed as manic depressive illness, now called bipolar disorder. That drawing was the only work of hers that ever hung in any place we lived.
Wow. Oh, wow. Gosh, that was beautiful. Especially the crisp. I felt that paper, that bond paper, and it's
Remember that?
yes.
Yes.
It's funny. I'm too young to remember it for myself, but my mom had some of that, and she had her own typewriter. I'm so drawn to that. Sonia Renee Taylor, one of my friends, called it when my mom passed away in 2015. She said, "Welcome to the saddest club in the world."
Really? Yeah.
I love that. I come back to that over and over again.
Beautiful.
And I love how you so evoke the need to. I feel like the work of a grieving daughter sometimes becomes trying to learn the mother as a whole person outside of the mother role.
Exactly. That's exactly what this book was about.
Yeah.
A project I started 45 years after her death.
Oh, geez.
40 years after her death. Because I'd written about her as my mother right after she died. And then I had all these boxes of her writing. She had published a book, and she had left me her writing in her will. And I just dragged it with me all those years. And then finally it was like, hello,
Yeah.
knock, knock. And so, I packed up one box of it for my first trip to Hedgebrook. I think I shipped it ahead, and, and I started the book there. And, 7 years later, it came out.
Wow, that's amazing. I love that. I love the way that you evoke her as a whole person, and like it's coming together in pieces for you as an image, and you're doing the same thing for the reader. So we're falling in love with your mother, just like this one of the many strangers who is just, is your mom a Libra by any chance?
She was a Pisces.
Oh, okay.
And the book is really about, when I say at mid-century, she was an activist, and she was a mother of 9, and she became a writer, and she was turned on to feminism, totally changed her life when she read The Feminine Mystique. And then somewhat later, we read the most radical things in Ms. Magazine together. But she was a civil rights activist and a peace activist. And so all that world opens up in the book.
Nice. Wonderful.
I got to be with her again in those times.
Right. There was no choice but to go along. Like you were your own, you were the purse that went to the rally too, because what are you going to do with the kids but take them with you? I love that.
Well, by the time I was born in 45, so by the time the quote unquote 60s came, I was in my 20s. And so I was in New York in a consciousness raising group, and my mother was in Washington in a consciousness raising group. And we would, do you know what happened in my group? It's like that.
Awesome. That's so awesome. Thank you so much for sharing with us. Sonora, are you ready?
I am, but I have to ask Honor, or just comment on one. It's so beautiful. I remember when you said that, I think you had shipped all those things ahead. And I remember talking about this, and you were saying that you were going to write this, and you were starting to write it. And so in the writing, we can see the view from Meadow House, the way you described it, right? And also just reading your book too, it's just so beautiful. Your descriptions of your mother, but also that heartbreaking line where she says, everything is just starting.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. And that's when she was diagnosed with cancer, right?
Everything was just starting. Yeah.
Everything was just starting. It's just so heartbreaking. And anyway, I have something sort of related, which I know we didn't talk about what we were going to read, but it's kind of related because I
can't wait to hear you read from this. I've been enjoying reading it so much.
Thank you, Anna. So I'm going to read from this chapter, What If I'm Not a Good Feminist? And it's about my own coming to feminism. So I first heard the word feminism when I was 20 years old from a professor in my all-women mass communication postgraduate program in Bombay. The head of my department, a woman named Jaru Mullah, smiled at my comments in class and told me I was a feminist. I wasn't alone in the despair I had felt for years, she said, and I should read a book by someone named Simone de Beauvoir and interview an Indian feminist lawyer named Sheila Barse. I fell upon feminism with a hunger I had thus far not understood and had tried to wish away. It's not like I hadn't taken myself on a feminist journey before either. As I started to devour books on feminism, I had, on a visit to my uncle and aunt in Bangalore, begged my uncle to let me stay alone overnight for 2 nights in a cottage at the Mysore Race Club. I wanted to be alone to read my copy of Germaine Greer's The Female Eunuch. I wanted to be alone to deeply feel the feelings I knew the book would stir up in me. I wanted to retreat into the kind of solitude that feminist practice recommended years before I read of such a recommendation. I was 20, and Greer's Western feminist call from the 1970s to imagine ourselves as more than wives and mothers echoed perfectly into the imagination of a Bombay girl in the late 1980s. I wouldn't quite heed her suggestion to taste my own menstrual blood, but everything else in that book made me feel less alone than I had in my whole life, sitting there all alone in the shade of a banyan tree in Mysore. But while my feminism had been a salve and a retreat, it had been an intellectual exercise until that day when I was naked on a railway station. That day, I learned that feminism would strip you down sometimes and ask you just how badly you really wanted to take up space in a man's world. How far do you want to roam from home? I roamed. You could say I was just a person who roamed, but no, I was a woman who roamed. A woman roaming far from home had better have a good reason. She follows her husband, and I did too, when I followed mine for his career to Bangalore and then Singapore. But to roam away from home and husband and protection and head on to nothing, who does that?
That's so beautiful. That's so resonant. Oh my God. I'm just like going back in my own life. And you know, you were so fortunate. Feminism existed. I mean, it was there when you decided to eat it, as it were, gobble it. And I was like, waiting for the next pamphlet to be published. And I've collected them with Alex Kate Shulman, all those writings in this new book called Women's Liberation, Feminist Movement that inspired a revolution and still can. Yes, there it is.
Drop the link. I'll drop the link.
And I'll send one to Hedgebrook, by the way.
That would be great. Thank you.
But, it's what's so fascinating in what you said. It was like the role of books in young women becoming feminists, because we're just like coming into who we are as women, and then there's a book to tell us how to do it, right?
Yeah.
And there are many books.
Yeah, and of course in India, feminists like Ismat Chugtai and writers had written fiction around feminist themes forever.
Right.
And there's an oral tradition, right? Because we had feminists before we had the Western word or the English word feminism.
Right.
To see, but I was raised in English, right? Like I was educated in English. So for me, the Western thought and the Western articulation of feminism, the kind that you're describing and have documented in your book, Honor, that resonated so strongly, and then helped me lean back into the stories and understand that all the things that I'd been reading and hearing about were feminism.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, people say, "Oh, your book. I'm dying to read your book about your mother and feminism." I said, "It's actually not about feminism. It's out of feminism.
Right.
It's out of a feminist, way of life. I like the word practice. I like the word existence. and it's not like, oh, what feminist thing am I going to do today? It's like who I am, as it turns out. I mean, I kept trying to, I kept trying to be less strong. Couldn't do it,
Less strong. I love that. That actually is one of the questions that I had for both of you, is this idea. What I love about both books is that they are not, they're memoir as guide, as opposed to like guide as, there's so much, like you're saying, there's so much knowledge in the stories of the lived experience of like, this is how it happened, and this is what we had to do about it, and this is what changed because we acted, and that's woven in. But you use memoir, both of you use memoir in very similar but completely different ways to create a guide for this, the feminism of now, right? Talk a little bit about that. Why?
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I mean, it's because we're in a kind of feminist context that it comes up naturally. I mean, the beginning of Sonora's book, I think it's the first chapter after the introduction, is she talks about raising a feminist son at the movies. And I thought, how's she going to do that? There aren't enough feminist movies. And then it's like, go to the movies and then go to dinner afterward and argue and talk about how women are treated in the movie. And that's like so out of life. And I thought that is the link between our books. This idea of feminism is not, it's not like neck up. It's how we live. And I'm so happy, Amber, that you picked that up about my book, because I tell my students all the time, I said, memoir is not writing about what happened. It's figuring out what happened through writing. So it doesn't necessarily tell the story, it's not like it's not like a documentary without a voiceover. I mean, it's a real dive into the experience to figure out, from the point of view of someone who, I wrote it between the ages of like 67 and 74, let's say. And what do I see? And in that, my mother is my daughter, because she's 20, she died at 50, and I'm now 20 years older than, it gets all mysterious and strange. And I loved in Sonora's book feeling that my book was in that same dimension. How interesting, someone from, across the planet, a mother, which I'm not, I'm the oldest of 9 children. That was like, been there, done that, or something.
That's not you.
And there we are in this being together.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and you're so right about memoir being making sense of, right, or finding your way to what happened. Because I wasn't, even in raising a feminist son. So when people ask me, tell us the tips to raise a feminist son, what were the steps that you took? And I feel like I wasn't taking steps. I wasn't getting up and saying, today we shall do this, and that will lead us to feminism. Or this is feminism. I think my son would have revolted against that. But it was more having a set of feminist values, or a lens to look at the world, and the language and the love, a feminist love of the world and of things. And then once you start doing it, that lens just gets sharper, and the feminist life, or the feminist existence, and the feminist language just gets more and more honed. And so you start living a feminist life, and you can't tell it apart, right? You cannot, and my son and I talk about this, like, I don't know any other way to be.
Well, one makes choices, you make this choice, and then you make the next choice. And and I love I love chronology, because it's like you make this choice, and then because you made that choice, then you have to make this choice, and then you make that choice. And I also love where you say in the chapter, Todd, I haven't gotten to that chapter yet, what if I slip up?
Yeah, because we're going to slip up.
You will, right. There's no way not to. Yeah. I think it's so interesting, because one of the questions I had for you, I was thinking on how, I was thinking about fighting racism.
Right.
and the smashing patriarchy, and how hard it is, to stay the course. And so one of the questions I had for you all was, my sister and I were talking about Gloria Steinem. She's sort of, my sister is my older sister. She's sort of starting to discover these things that I have, at least because I love the books that I love and I love Hedgebrook, I know a lot more about. And so she's coming to me and she's like, man, Gloria Steinem, the movie came out, and she's like, she's been fighting this fight for so long. And I was like, right, this is the thing. And it's like, it's exhausting work. It's exhausting work. And so one of my questions was, how do you stay the course? But even as you were talking about how, like, I don't know another way to be, I think what I really mean is, how do you stay the course as like an active frontliner? How do you, Sonora, I've been watching the backlash hit you as you put this work out into the world and in the very social media. So what is the joy and freedom here that you're really insisting we can have? Why are you trying to give this to us?
Yeah, I'm glad you're asking this, because I remember and this connection with anti-racist work, right? Feminism and anti-racism and this intersection of those, because a few years ago I wrote, during the Ferguson protests, I'd written something about, media and racism, and published it in the Seattle Times. And then I remember seeing the comments come up, and just like horrible, vicious comments. And my son was in college at the time, and I said, hey, why don't you set up a fake account and like take these guys down, like get in there and argue? And he said, okay, let me look. And he read the comments and he said, oh, like these people, they live in a blighted fog, and that is their punishment. And I remember, yeah, exactly, right? Wow. And I employed the same thing to the backlash now, right? Reading comments and saying, I can't even respond to these because they're on a different plane altogether, right? This is a blighted frog, and that is their punishment, which means the opposite of that is joy. And so if that is their punishment, that they're in this weird world where they're just so angry and lashing out, we get to be in this place where we are joyful. I mean, I'm not saying that they don't have joy, but
not all the time, right?
Yeah, that we get to feel like, okay, I don't even need to fight this. I don't need to with you on these.
No, you can't change people. I was thinking of it last night as I was watching the Biden speech. And I was like, every time they went to like Ted Cruz and these people who they were like not clapping for voters' rights. They were not clapping for the Violence Against Women Act. They were not, it was just like they were not clapping for anti-racism. And it was just like, I cannot have a conversation with those people. I want to move forward. And I think what I felt this last night, and I felt it like in the last 99 days I felt like, can we really, I'm fine, in my world being a feminist, but can we really believe that it's possible to change these things? Can we really come out, and can we really, and I'm just thrilled. I mean, the sort of writing this book during the Trump years, the end of Obama and the Trump years, and really encountering, my parents and evolution, my own childhood experience in anti-racism, I thought, oh, that really did happen. That really did happen. And that really was how we lived, and that really did form me. And I can't change. I'm not going to go back. I just keep, we say in our introduction to the Women's Liberation Anthology, there were years when you couldn't say I am a feminist. I did, but not as often as I do now. It really was
right.
Like a bad word, So it's an extraordinary moment. And I hope that all the younger women, even Sonora, whom I consider my peer, and like we're the same age, but actually we're not the same age. And I think, remember this moment when it's okay to say, I am a feminist.
So,
because it's altogether possible the history of feminism is that it gets lost. And then you just have to trust that you have been formed by these ideas and by your connections to other women. And by the revolutions. That's the title of the book, Our Revolution. It's like, it's the revolutions in our relationships with each other as women that feminism has brought about.
I think that there's, I agree that there's a cyclical piece of this. There's a cyclical a flow to almost every truth, right? That comes into fruition. It's like both brand new and not new at all. It's been here before. But what I love is that it's continuing. The feminism itself has evolved from a very, like you brought up the feminine mystique, from this like this like nebulous thing that one or two people were sort of willing to talk about vocally. And I think what's really interesting, what I find with like my child, for instance, who's about to be 12, they're renaming just like they renamed themselves with ease. It is the word is not what matters. The intention, the impact is what matters. And I wonder how feminism will rename itself and will evolve, where it went from feminism, and you had the first wave, second wave, third wave, that you had intersectional feminism. You had this it's sort of branching out. And I think what I want to know from you all really is what is that kernel of truth, and the one thing that you wish everyone would get about this, would understand? What is the misconception you want to debunk, or the truth? The truth will set you free, but first it'll piss you off. What is that truth? What is that one piece that you wish every single person would really understand when you say feminism? It means this for you.
Well, should I? And it connects to what we were talking about earlier, was that, growing up in India, and when I came to the word feminism, I was shocked when I came to the US and heard American women say that feminism was a bad word, or, oh, I don't think of myself as a feminist, I'm a humanist, or, whatever other stuff. Because I was so much a feminist. Like I just thought that, okay, this is all, emerged in America. And when I go to America, I'll meet a whole lot of other feminists, and this will be like this, eventually that did end up happening. But for many years, people didn't call themselves feminists, and that has changed now. And I was very startled by that, because at least the English speaking urban, English educated women in India that embraced feminism were all for it. There was no shame around the word. So what I want everyone to, it goes back to the old definition of feminism, that, you believe in the full humanity of women. And when you start to explore what that means, it means they have an opinion, they have choices, they can make choices about their bodies, they are not just fit to lead, they make great leaders, right? They will fucking save your life. Can I use the F word? Is that okay? All right, okay. Sure. Like Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand. With COVID, and right, India is reeling right now under Modi, and we were reeling under Trump. Like, these are all things that come from men believing women and to be inept in some way. And I know I'm rambling, but the point is, it's believing in the full humanity of women, and therefore we would have had women leaders, and therefore we would not be dying. Honor.
The full humanity of every human being.
Yes.
Even if they doesn't know it, even if you do not know it yourself. Barbara Smith was speaking about this when we had our launch event for the Women's Liberation Anthology. And she has a great, I can't put my finger on it, but she has a great, a great definition. And it has to do with the full humanity of every human being. the recognition of that. And feminism, I mean, intersectionality has been now named, or for the last 10 or 15 years, named intersectionality, but the very first essays were, in the late 60s, was the Mount Vernon Black Feminist Organization talking about it, and Fran Beal's famous essay, Double Jeopardy. So these ideas have always been essential to feminism. And so it's not, of course, it's the full humanity of women, but it's the full humanity of everyone. And patriarchy actually truncates the full humanity of both women and men, and certainly of people who choose a non-binary people, obviously. I mean, that is the exciting new voice, I think, now for feminism, is this demonstrable choice to be non-binary.
Yes. I even, as you're talking about, this is the new language, right? I was saying, the new renaming, not the new renaming, but the naming again and again of this. And it's, the idea is that it's not a change of the boot that's on the neck. It's the removal of the boot, right? It's idea that we actually are all free, because you cannot, in the same way that Black Lives Matter does not, it means that all lives matter. That's the whole point. That's the whole point. We're talking about Black Lives Matter because you don't get it. It's like feminism because you don't get it. And so when you get it, then we can talk about humanism. We can talk about how we all become better human beings, and we all grow together. And I love that. I love that sense of, I'm going to ask you about your joy. So I'm giving you a heads up. I get a sense of lift when I meet people who are still very passionate. Both of you are very alive in your passion about this, and it doesn't feel like it has exhausted you yet. And I want to know about that fountain of joy that you have tapped into for yourself. Where do you find your joy?
Well, I haven't, there are days when I feel exhausted, right? I'm sure you feel the same way. And sometimes we have connected on days like that, right? There are days when it is exhausting and you feel like, okay, all is lost, and, where do we go? But luckily, that's just a fleeting, moment of exhaustion. Joy from, I get a lot of joy from songs and stories, and a lot of my music is from India, and it's in Urdu and in Hindi, and that can just center me again. And a lot of it is love songs. I mean, almost all of them are love songs, all songs of revolution, and I feel like that it's the same thing, so I listen to love songs. I feel the sense of hope when I listen to those, and I feel like living a feminist life is an instant like spark or an ignition of hope. Like there's a constant burning flame. How like we the whatever the gas fireplace that I have, there's that constant thing that's burning, right? And then you have
the pilot light.
The pilot light. Yeah. It's the pilot light of hope for me, because it's always there, and then sometimes it flames up because there's work to be done, or something wonderful has happened and we're all marching in the streets, or something terrible has happened and we're all marching in the streets, right? So I think the joy comes from that, and the hope when I see, for me, it's my son, and seeing that, okay, feminist men are possible, and I totally agree. Feminism is about the full humanity of all people, but also recognizing that it is not given to women and LGBTQ folks as easily, and so striving for that, right? So fighting for progress gives me a lot of hope, and it also gives me joy, even if it is a fight. The joy is in the fight as well.
I just think of I'm right now at the end of my semester of teaching nonfiction at the New School. So all the students are in their turning in their final third 25-page essay.
Oh, wow.
And the thesis students, my three thesis students are all women. One is 78, one is from China, and I think she's 26. And one was brought here from Russia by her parents when she was 4, and she's writing about Russian words that cannot be translated into English, that are about cultural differences. And my joy is seeing all these students able to write and speak what they actually mean and think. And it, at a time when I'm sort of post 2 books and sort of flat on my back as far as my own creative life is concerned, just being able to help these younger, usually, people get it down on the page, articulate what they have been wanting to say. I see them saving their own lives. And so it's this creative process in which, it's like, people say, well, who are your readers? And it's always a complicated question for me, because of course when I write, I am myself evolving, but I'm also trying to make it clear to readers. So I guess that too it's also seeing my own writing happen so that I actually say what I mean. And feminism added to that means that I don't have to run it through some weird washing machine of patriarchal properness in order, propriety and properness and, truncation. What about truncation? That's good. I can just say it if I can find the language, which also means making a language, making a kind of sentence, Virginia Woolf's thing of the female sentence. So.
Love it. I'm so glad both of you were able to join me. I'm so glad we finally made this happen. I feel like it's just in time. It's very timely. I want to ask you one last question, but I wanted to tell everyone that we will have another Cottage Chat with Shinoa Igawa. It's more of a craft talk and a reading from The Whale Child. That's on May 11th, Tuesday, May 11th. So keep a lookout for that. Also, this full recording will be available on our YouTube channel. So come and subscribe, take a look from the beginning if you missed any of it. And before we go, I would love for you each to give us just like, tell anybody who hasn't yet picked up your book what they might get from it, what the gift is there for them.
You will find that you are not alone.
Ooh.
You're not alone as a mother. You're not alone as a daughter. You're not alone in struggling to make a relationship with your mother or your daughter or with your women friends. You're not alone.
Wow, I think I want to steal that.
Great.
Steal that and say that it applies to mine as well, and also that you'll read a love letter. I think you'll get in my book a love letter written to the next generation of men, maybe a love letter to the men that I don't know yet.
Same here. Love letters.
Yeah.
I'm just typing it up so that everybody can see it in case they're looking in the chats, because those are beautiful. You will find you are not alone. That is the gift that is waiting for you in Honor's work. Go get you some. And this, we've had somebody just respond. This is such a timely book. You'll read a love letter to the next generation of men. Finding somebody who can write a love letter to a generation of men is pretty impressive these days. So I give you full credit for that.
Well, you should meet the young man.
Oh, I know. It's poetic. Apparently, what was it? The blight. What was it?
A blighted fog.
A blighted fog. I was like, okay, come on, poet, go in, poet.
Unless
Yeah.
it's a mathematician or something, but maybe
Right,
he'll be a
right.
poet on the
Among other
side.
things. Among other things. What a gift. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
I have just a few little announcements to make to you. Just a reminder, you can see this whole recording on YouTube in just a little bit after the broadcast ends. We would love for you to make a donation. This has been provided for free, but we can do this with your support. So please consider making a donation. The link is in the chat. And we will be back for another Cottage Chat on May 11th, Tuesday, May 11th, with Shinoa Igawa, who is an Indigenous writer from the Seattle, Washington area, and her new children's book called The Whale Child. I hope you all have enjoyed this Cottage Chat with Dr. Sonora Jha and Honor Moore. I'm Amber Flame, the program director here at Hedgebrook. So honored to be able to bring this to you all. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening. Talk to you soon.